just a normal day and she was taking out the trash. While she did this, she left the front door open. Her husband David was at work at the time. Her husband returned to find his 3-month pregnant wife at the time dead in their home. She had been shot twice in the head and also had a gunshot to the hand, which is believed to have been a defensive wound. She was also brutally stabbed, raped, and her organs had been carved out post-mortem. The police also discovered that her blood was collected into a bucket, and whoever did this to her, that the murderer actually seemingly used that to bathe in. It was found in the bathroom. They also found an empty yogurt container, which they believe the murderer drank out of. So he actually drank her blood out of the container, and they did figure out that the gun used to kill Teresa was the same gun that was used to kill Ambrose just a month prior. Just 2 days after Teresa's death, there was another report of a strange occurrence in the neighbourhood. Somebody had purchased 2 puppies, and the puppies were later found on the seller's front garden. They had been killed and drained of their blood. 4 days later, on January 27th, a mass murder occurred in the neighbourhood. 38-year-old Evelyn Myroth was babysitting her 22-month-old nephew David. Alongside them in the house at the time was Evelyn's son, her 6-year-old son Jason, and David Meredith, who was a friend of hers and a neighbour. Evelyn was taking a bath at the time of the break-in, and David was babysitting the children while she did so. When the break-in occurred, Dan made his way into the hallway where he was shot dead immediately. Evelyn's 6-year-old son Jason ran to his mother's bedroom at this time, where he tried to take cover, and he was also fatally shot. Baby David was also killed with a single gunshot to the head, and finally the perpetrator made his way into the bathroom where he shot Evelyn once in the head, killing her. Again, the police found that Evelyn's blood, she'd been stabbed multiple times and her blood had been collected into a bucket. A 6-year-old local girl actually had a play date scheduled with Jason, 6-year-old Jason, and when she arrived at the home, she startled the perpetrator, who fled the scene. In David's car, he actually stole David's wallet and car keys, and he made away in his car. The little girl alerted another neighbour, who then made his way into Evelyn's home and made the horrific discovery. He alerted the authorities, and they found that the perpetrator had actually left perfect hand and shoe prints in Evelyn's blood, which would have been really helpful in identifying the person responsible. Baby David's body wasn't actually at the house. He was later found on March 24th in the grounds of a local church. They had found that some of his organs and body tissues were missing, and they later discovered that these had actually been consumed by the killer. 2 FBI agents, Russ Vorpagel and Robert Russler, were called in to investigate box was a gun and lots of kind of shredded, blood-stained wallpaper. When questioned by police on the gun, he said that he had used this to kill several dogs. He was also found to have Daniel Meredith's wallet on his being at the time. The authorities performed a search of Richard's apartment, and what they found was truly horrific. His walls, floor, ceiling, fridge, and drinking and eating utensils were completely covered in blood. They found a blender on the side which still had body tissue in it, and they described the rotten smell, the rotten flesh smell coming from his kitchen as being just horrendous. They later discovered that Richard was making smoothies out of animal and human body parts that he would consume. In his refrigerator were several animal body parts wrapped in foil, and there were also several boxes of Tupperware which they also found contained human remains at the time. On the side were several pet collars, but no pets anywhere to be seen, and also some posters or various diagrams spread out depicting several aspects of human anatomy, human biological anatomy. The police also discovered a calendar in Richard's apartment. He had written the word "today" on 2 of the murders that he carried out, 2 of the dates, and horrifically, he had also written the same word on 44 more dates after the second murder. So the FBI believed that yes, of course, he would have killed again, and probably 44 more times if that calendar was anything to go by. On May 8th, a jury found Chase guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced him to death by gas chamber. The judge ruled that he was not legally insane at the time, so he would be sentenced to death and not life imprisonment. In some of the interviews that the FBI conducted, it was clear that something wasn't quite right with Richard Chase's state of mind. He said that he was extremely fearful of Nazis and UFOs, and that it wasn't his fault that he killed all of those people. He had to do so to keep himself alive. On another occasion, Richard asked the FBI officers for a radar gun, and he explained that this could be used to apprehend or take down the Nazi UFOs, so that the Nazis could stand trial for the murders that they committed. So he completely dissociated himself from his actions, and he blamed these Nazi UFOs for the crimes that had been committed. On December 26, 1980, Chase was found dead in his bed in his cell, his prison cell. The cause of death was determined to be overdose. Seemingly, Chase had been saving up his antidepressants for several months, and he had taken them all at once. And that was obviously a fatal dose that he took. They also found a suicide note in his cell, which I couldn't really find the contents of, but supposedly it talked about him ingesting the pills. So that's how they came to the conclusion that he took an overdose of his antidepressants. So going back to Richard Chase himself and who he was and what might have caused him to commit these horrendous crimes, he was say that he was lying and that his childhood was fine, whereas others say that his dad was quite a strict disciplinarian and would beat Richard. So I'm not sure, but there isn't much on his early childhood. All we know is that he was a seemingly just average child. There was nothing really different about him. He was a bit of a loner, I guess, but nothing that would have pointed to him doing what he did in his adult life until he hit age 10. At 10 years old, Richard started to exhibit all three parts of the MacDonald triad. So that's bedwetting, animal torture, and arson and pyromania. So the MacDonald triad is something that some people believe in quite strongly, others dispute it, but it's interesting that he did exhibit all three of those parts, which, if for those of you who don't know, there's some research that shows a link between these three aspects in childhood and people that later become serial killers or psychopaths and commit these kinds of crimes. That's not to say that all children who exhibit these signs turn out to be serial killers, but there is research that shows that a significant number of serial killers showed two or more of the aspects of the triad in childhood. In his adolescence, he became quite a heavy drug user, so predominantly he smoked marijuana and took LSD. Chase subsequently developed his face and neck. And even at this point, this was never reported, and his mother didn't feel like he needed the treatment that he'd been prescribed. On August 3rd that same year, the police found Richard naked in a field, covered in blood. They also found a bucket full of blood and organs, and they later discovered that the tissues and blood in the bucket were all from a cow that he had killed and used to smear the blood all over himself. However, this again wasn't reported. I guess he didn't really commit a crime, but nothing came of it, and I feel like there's a lot of behaviour here that, when it was ignored or kind of brushed aside, which it could have been picked up on, particularly by his mother, who really didn't help the situation at all. As a side note, when asked how Chase would choose his victims, he stated that he would try the front doors, and if they were locked, that meant that he wasn't welcome, so he would leave them alone. However, if the doors were unlocked, that meant that he was welcome. So again, I think that fed into that whole vampire of Sacramento name that he was given by the press at the time. So it's clear that Richard Chase was suffering from some quite severe mental illness, particularly given his behaviour started at around age 10. I feel that he was let down by his mother, particularly. He was taken off of his medication and left to his own devices, where his paranoid delusions, fascination with blood, and complete lack of boundaries were just a deadly cocktail of aspects. It was just a deadly combination, and it was probably only a matter of time before something horrific happened. Anyway, so yeah, this is all that